This is Python's Paradise. This is your host, Greg Gilbert, aka the Python Hyena, straight out of Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada, but rocking a beautiful Toronto City background behind him because I love Toronto. But folks, here we are on Easter Monday, April the 21st, 2025. And there's not a whole lot of times I have guests return in the run of a year, but I'm definitely making an exception here because this guy always brings it. And he's looking very, very, very classy on this Zoom today, and he always does. It's kind of like those old days when I watched wrestling. Everybody kept wondering what robe Randy Savage was going to wear as he came out to the ring and what gown Elizabeth was going to wear to match it. Well, it's kind of like my guest here today. And we're going to be talking about a 1963 comedy classic, A Mad, 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 Mad World. Folks, I give you the absolutely awesome Geoffrey Mark. How do you do, Geoffrey?
I don't give me away to anybody. Keep me for yourself. Good heavens. I'm glad I'm excited for our topic because it is one of my favorite films of all time. I know the director's wife, I know the director's daughter. The director is my favorite director of all time, and I've interviewed at one time or another almost everybody in this film. So I have a lot of stuff to bring to all of you who are spending time with us today. Some really cool shit.
Wow. Yeah, it was I don't know whether how early this was in pioneering these uh comedies with heavy doses of cast members, because of course it would go on. You'd have like the Cannonball Run. You would have a lot of them were like the car chase movies, you had Hit and Run
No,
and
I think we're putting the cart before the horse in
mhm.
this one because those all came after Mad
Yeah,
World.
that's what I said. I think this
And
was the
and I
catalyst
think
that started
well
that. Yeah.
there had been a couple around the world, around the world in 80 days. There had been a couple of films that were very long involving major casts where almost every part, even the smallest of parts, were filled by big stars. And Stanley Kramer had done it, in fact, in a couple of his films. He had just come off doing two very, very heavy films, both starring Spencer Tracy. So Spencer Tracy in the late 50s and 1960s almost became Stanley Kramer's muse. Stanley Kramer is the man, the genius who directed this. And they'd done, really hard hitting, heavy stuff. And Stanley got the idea, I'm doing all these big heavy films with these heavy duty morals and heavy duty issues. How about we just take all of that energy and make like the best comedy there ever was? And yes, I hear you, Mel Brooks fans. I hear you, Marx Brothers fans. I'm not saying there aren't other incredibly funny movies out there, but I really do believe it's a mad, 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 mad world is the funniest movie ever made.
Oh, wow. Okay. Okay.
There's nothing wasted. Literally everyone who's in it is a star. There's nobody if you're a fan of films and television at all, and you watch this very long film, because thank you people out there who care, the film was restored to its original length. It's a mad, 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 mad world had the same fate, unfortunately, that Judy Garland's A Star is Born had in the 50s, in that it was released with an intermission. It was released to be this huge, and they got the idea they could make more money if they cut the film down and didn't have the intermission. And People who saw it early got to see the whole thing. People who saw it 6 months later saw it truncated, on television, even more truncated. And thankfully, they have restored this thing uh, back to what it was. And I don't judge people usually, but if you don't laugh all the way through this film, there is, I mean, get a new drug dealer because the stuff you're smoking isn't any good.
Exactly. Exactly. You know. Yeah. Um, I agree. And of course, this came out 9 years before I came into existence. But like I said, it's always nice to venture into films that were made before my time. I had somebody on Saturday who likes to teach classes on silent films and stuff. And he says one of the things that always bothers him is when somebody says silent films are boring. And I'm sitting here thinking, there's nothing boring about Buster Keaton
No.
or Charlie Chaplin. And I talked to him. I said, and this guy's way younger than me, so it's so cool that he's into this. And I said to him, I said, that is the ignorance of what I like to call the TikTok generation, you know?
Let's be fair. Let's be fair because there were always people who felt that. There are people who won't watch a black and white film. There are people who won't watch a silent film. There are people who won't watch I Love Lucy because it's in black and white. There's always going to be people out there who only understand just that little bit of time they've been alive, and whatever came before doesn't exist for them. But there were people in the silent movie days who didn't like silent films because no one was talking. Now, again, my drug joke, you need a new deal. Yeah, if you're watching any of Buster Keaton's work, any of Charlie Chaplin's work, and you don't laugh, yeah, there's something wrong with you. But there are people
Exactly.
out there, but there are people, hey, my beloved grandmother, for whom almost everything that's good about me comes from her. She didn't like I Love Lucy. She didn't like the Three Stooges. She didn't like slapstick. Well, she's entitled to that. She
Hmm.
taught me about other things. And there are people out there who just slapstick comedy isn't their thing. I know people who just don't understand the Marx Brothers. Don't get it, don't understand the characters, don't understand why they're there. I've met half the people I've met don't find the Three Stooges funny at all. They're entitled. But let's not talk about the disenfranchised. Let's make this about the people who are on board with all of this because there's so much about this film to unpack about how it was made, who was in it, and what was going on backstage while it was being made. And I think our friends and fans out there would enjoy hearing about that.
Well, yeah, especially coming from you. Now, I think I need to know about the first time you saw this film. Did you see this when it came out in 1963? You did.
I saw this at the brand new Seaview movie theater in Canarsie, Brooklyn in 1963. Uh, my father and his best friend, who had two children who are like brothers to me. So the one, two, three, four, five of us. The mothers didn't want any part of this. Took us out to see It's a Mad, 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 Mad World, and then took us to the Seaview Diner afterwards for malteds. And as a child, so I was when the movie came out, I was four. Four? Yeah, not yet five, but I would have been five a little bit later in the year. That there were so many people in it that every time the camera turned, there was someone new. And
Hmm.
I recognized, even at that age, almost all of them. When Zasu Pitts came on the stage, on the screen rather, I started to laugh just because, like, what's she doing there? When the Three Stooges have a cameo, and got, good heavens, it's the Three Stooges. Those were important people to me as a child. And there they were. There was Jerry Lewis. All of these people I'm mentioning either don't speak at all or have teeny tiny parts, but everybody in the film is like that. There is, I think honestly, other than maybe Bob Hope and Lucille Ball, I think every funny person in Hollywood was in this film at one point or another. And the people who were in it, Sid Caesar, who was a friend of mine, Edie Adams, who was a friend of mine, Mickey Rooney, who I didn't care for as a person, but was mighty talented, Buddy Hackett, who was a friend of mine, Ethel Merman, who I wrote a book about. I knew these people. As an adult, I got to know almost the entire cast. I never met Mr. Tracy, who's my favorite actor. I never met Dorothy Provine, who played one of the leads, but I knew just about everybody else in the film from one point or another. So the film as a child was the funniest thing I'd ever seen outside of I Love Lucy. And as an adult, it's like, uh, I should write a book about this film because I have spoken with all of the leads about the film. And I don't think it's ever been matched. There have been other films made about road, making a trip, The Great Race, and those magnificent men and their flying machines. And Mad World itself has been redone, kind of, sort of. But I don't think the original has ever been even gotten close to as far as writing, direction, cinematography, and the performances of these people are magnificent. You have these great comedy icons, and then you have people like Ethel Merman stealing the film away from them, which is kind of cool to watch, and even cooler when you've talked to the people who were there about her performance and how that happened and why it happened. And, uh, you know, uh, pick a point anywhere in what I'm saying. Let's start sharing with our friends.
I was going to say, we've done tributes on two of the principal, like your, I had to bring this up on IM or on Wikipedia because they have this all the cast all sectioned, and we've done tributes on Milton Berle and on Ethel Merman.
We have, but we
Yep.
really haven't discussed this film in any detail.
Nope, nope, we have not. And I find it holy cow, Buster Keaton's in this.
Oh, sure.
Now I have did a tribute on Don Knotts. I've had his daughter on.
Dom was a friend of mine. Another person I discussed the film with.
Yeah.
I never got to know Phil Silvers. Has a big part. I never got to know Jimmy Durante personally, but his work, and I know a lot of people who knew him. So even the people I didn't get to meet, other than Dorothy Provine, I have insider stories about almost every single person in this cast. We're teasing our friends out there enough. We need to start bringing in some of the good information so that they can enjoy this.
Yes, we do. Now, who do you? Okay, you mentioned the director Stanley Kramer, who of course has
Yes.
got an incredible career in himself. Did you know him, or did you just know his daughter?
I know him through his wife, his widow, and his daughter. And
Okay.
long before I met them, he was my favorite director.
Mm-hmm.
I'm one of those kids, I wasn't out playing, I was doing research. I was in the library looking stuff up back when there was no internet. So I was already gathering info on Mr. Kramer and on this film long before I was in show business myself. So this film has been a part of me for a very long time. I don't know that there are very many directors I can point to who I have the quality of what Stanley Kramer brought to movies. George Cukor, perhaps. Vincent Minnelli, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
But there are his very, very few peers. That's how good he was. Everything Stanley Kramer did was top notch, top quality, top casting, top cinematography. Um, like any other director, some of his films did better at the box office than others, but there were no huge flops or anything. Everything he did was first rate. And I think as a comedy, this is certainly his masterpiece. His dramas, especially the ones starring Spencer Tracy, I guess is Coming to Dinner, and all of those heavy dramas they did together are all individually masterpieces.
What do you think about? I've always found this interesting. Um, and I'm going to give you an example of this. Uh, I went recently and I saw the Minecraft movie, which I had no interest in at all. But it was the only thing playing that I was like, well, I like to go once a week. This looks like the lesser of the evils. And I sat down in the chair, and for something I wasn't interested in, I came away and was like, oh my goodness. Not only did I enjoy it, but I couldn't believe how funny Jason Momoa could be because I knew him as Aquaman. And in this movie, he's this big hulking guy, but he's a complete buffoon. And I was like, I love the fact that he was cast to play this because it was so against what I would think of him as. And I actually grew a greater appreciation for his talent. And what reason I'm bringing this up is, you get Spencer Tracy in this massive comedy, but he was known mainly as a dramatic actor. And of course, we talked about this with Ethel Merman when we talked about Airplane.
Right.
Um, Mainly the
But
studio wanted a lot of comedians and
but Mr. Tracy did comedies. He just hadn't done them in a while. Certainly his films with Katharine Hepburn were comedies. They
mhm,
weren't heavy dramas. When Mr. Tracy was a contract player at MGM, so for the 1930s and 40s, he did a lot of comedies and westerns and heavy dramas. But at this point in his life, he really hadn't done a comedy in a while because he and Miss Hepburn had worked in the 50s together and would again, they did the desk set together that in the 50s and
that was an early film for computers too.
yeah, it kind of introduced computers to the world. But the
Hmm.
point being, he was always a facile comedy. I say comedy actor as opposed to comedian or comic because it wasn't that Spencer Tracy was going to do a comedy monologue for you. But when the script required comedy, he knew what he was doing. He had a sense of humor. He knew how to play comedy and to bring something a little different and extra than you'd expect. Because one of the Katharine Hepburn films he did, I won't go into the whole film to bore anybody, but he's going over to a water fountain and they're discussing Katharine Hepburn, and someone says how thin she is. And he goes, yeah, but what's there is churse. Well, churse wasn't in the script. The word was choice. And after the yelled cut, the director said, Spence, I mean, it worked great. I'm not going to change it, but where did churse come from? He said, you always got to serve it up a little bit of dressing to make it more delicious. Well, that's someone who has a comedy instinct.
Okay.
And he's not really terribly funny in this film. He's almost kind of the straight man for everybody else.
Hmm.
Why don't we go through the cast a little bit and let's talk about what was going on with them and what was going
Let's
on
do
back.
that. I'll let you take the reins on that because I think where I was going is that when Airplane was made, they rather than cast comedic actors, they cast almost entirely like your Peter Grays, your Lloyd Bridges, Leslie Nielsen made a whole career out of this after this, and Robert Stack, and it
They ca-
really, really paid off.
they cast people who were playing in that particular film, which is different from
Mm-hmm.
It's a Mad, Mad World. Let's keep on Mad World, but for like for 10
Yeah.
seconds here. The film Airplane cast people who were doing parodies of their own screen stereotypes. So they were playing the kind of parts they'd always played as if is but crooked, which is what made it so funny because they all played it deadly straight, which is what made it so funny.
Yeah.
In Mad World, you've got comedians who are doing comedy, and I don't think anyone really played a stereotype. I mean, Don Knotts was doing his nervous thing. That's Don Knotts. Phil Silver's, yeah, I gotta get me, go, here we go. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That was his persona. It's what he did in everything he did. But I think most of the rest of the of people played parts.
Mm-hmm.
They were all good actors, and they were good actors playing farce and slapstick comedy. So there's levels of comedy in this film. It isn't all of one cloth. All right, so we talked about Mr. Tracy. Sid Caesar.
I love them.
Sid Caesar was off screen, nothing like what he was on television or on film. Sid was quiet. He was a little shy, insecure, and unfortunately, and I don't mean to make his fans think less of him. This is just how it was. Sid was having kind of a sort of a nervous breakdown while he was making this film. Sid, the pressure of being Sid Caesar, of doing a 90-minute show or a 60-minute variety show every week, the stress of that and his own, as we say, mishigas, the craziness in his head, he went to alcohol and drugs to conquer the pain. Well, unfortunately, what it did was dull his talent. Sid just about didn't remember making the film. He knew he was in it. He remembered scenes, but he couldn't remember any of the specifics because he was on something or his consciousness was changed by medications. It was very, very difficult. And because he was in that situation, it made it difficult for Edie Adams. Now, Edie and I were also friends. Edie was cast in this film because the year before her husband, Ernie Kovacs, died. And someday we need to do a show about that event because almost nothing people believe it's true about it is true. But let's not do that this time.
Sure.
What you need to know about it is that Ernie unfortunately had a gambling issue. And when he died, between gambling debts, uh, borrowing against contracts where he hadn't performed yet, money they had spent because his ex-wife kidnapped the daughters away from Sid. Edie, as a widow, found herself deeply, deeply, deeply in debt. Edie had been a musical comedy star on Broadway and had spent the last few years before only working with Sid on his television shows and his game show. Take a good look. When he died and how he died, which is, we're not going to talk about that. Supposedly he died in an accident. Not exactly. Uh, Edie was left with this enormous debt, and all of show business ran to her help. Everybody was hiring her. All of a sudden, Edie was big enough to have her own half-hour variety show. Here's Edie. All of a sudden, she was on every variety show, every sitcom, making films. She hadn't been that big of a star, but Hollywood just opened up 9 million doors for her. Mad World was another door. Edie could be very, very funny. She was a wonderful singer and a wonderful mimic of other female performers and singers, and did a wonderful Marilyn Monroe impression.
Mhm.
But all of her scenes pretty much were with Sid. Well, when the person you're working with isn't all there, it makes working with them very, very difficult. I made my first film with Peter Fonda, and all the scenes I was in was with Peter Fonda, and we were shooting on location. Well, Peter, at that moment in his life, in the middle 70s, so I was a teenager, playing an adult, was worse for wear for drugs and alcohol. He later got clean and sober. He was wonderful talent, and we were friends until he died. But playing with him, shooting with him, well, if he doesn't give you anything, you have nothing with which to react. And that was the problem, was that it took an awful lot of takes to get Sid to give the performance that was as funny as it was. And that made it much, much harder for Edie. So making the film, Edie was grateful for the money and the exposure, but it was hard for her because
Mhm.
Sid was, you know, for those of you who have never seen the film, there are scenes where the entire cast are together, but in the beginning and at the end. But most of the film in the middle, it's episodic stories of people in twos and threes trying to get to a certain place to get money. So it's a film all about greed, which is a wonderful topic for any kind of a thing. You had Mickey Rooney and Buddy Hackett as a couple, not a married couple, but as two best buddies. What can you say? How could Mickey Rooney not be funny if he was sober? And he was sober during the making of the film. Buddy Hackett, you know, I have to be honest. Buddy and I were friends for a long time. Buddy had trouble with gay people. And my being gay, sometimes that came out of his mouth was not very nice,
Yeah.
which does not dim how hysterically funny he was and how many times he made me laugh at dinner or something where he's just being Buddy Hackett. He's very funny in the film. Uh, Buddy and Mickey didn't necessarily get along. Two big egos. Mickey thought that he was the number one box office in the world still. He had been for 2 or 3 years in the 1940s, number one box office draw male. Well, now it's 20 years later, and he's not starring in films anymore. He's playing character parts, but the attitude hadn't changed. And Buddy had a mouth on him like you cannot believe. So the language flew fast and furious between them. And Buddy had no problem. Oh, the camera's on, the mic's on. Well, let me tell you this. And stuff came out of his mouth that Stanley Kramer couldn't use. There's nothing dirty in this film. There's no four-letter words. There's no real nudity or, I mean, Edie gets her slit of her dress torn, but it's not sexual. It's just funny. But Stanley had the talent to direct these guys and edited their work together. You'd think they really were best friends. And Buddy made some films. Buddy knew how to act.
Mhm.
And Mickey, of course, knew how to act. He was a brilliant actor. So Stanley used the best of what these people brought to the table. Cut.
Okay.
I have to go to the bathroom.
I'll just press pause.
Friends, in the film, an airplane goes through a sign on the highway. It says Pepsi Cola, the pause that refreshes. And for me, I just had a pause that refreshes. So that's where I was. But we cut away from all of that because we don't want to talk about bodily functions. Back to the film. So you have, I guess we should give a little bit of the plot.
Uh-huh.
A crook who's gotten out of prison going towards a stash of money he'd put away before he got in prison, careens off of a highway near Palm Springs, and a whole bunch of other people in various cars stop because they watch the car go off. People from the cars go down a whole bunch of rocks down to where this poor guy is now dying. It's Jimmy Durante playing the crook. And one of the best side gags that are almost corny and yet it fits. He tells them about the money. And then how we know he dies, he literally kicks the bucket. There's a bucket sitting there. He kicks the bucket, and now we know he's dead. So that's how all of these people get involved with. So Sid Caesar and Edie Adams are in one car, and Mickey Rooney and Buddy Hackett are in another car. Jonathan Winters is driving a moving van. Now, for Jonathan, uh, he was just out of a facility because Jonathan was in and out of a few facilities for mental health issues. And this was either going to help him to heal or it was going to push him over the edge. It helped him to heal. So he's there. And then Milton Berle and Dorothy Provine play a middle-aged man and his much younger trophy wife, and Ethel Merman plays the mother-in-law from hell. So she plays Dorothy Provine's mother, who's really not a whole lot older than Milton Berle is supposed to be in the film, but he calls her mother. Milton was very concerned that Merman was stealing scenes from him. They'd had a history. First of all, in the 1930s, they had some fun together. Milton was extraordinarily well known for being extraordinary in the bedroom department. And Ethel was a young star on Broadway, and why not have some fun? In the late 1940s, in 1949, Milton had Merman on his television show, live, the Texaco Star Theater. And she came out and did some of her famous songs. And they did a sketch together about two people at the turn of the 20th century in the new automobiles, in outfits for people who used to dress because it was all, you had no tops to car, you had to dress warm. And Merman had heard that Milton was pushing people upstage, grabbing their shoulder and pushing them so that he got all the spotlight. So Merman put little pins facing up on her shoulder so that when he went like that, ow, and he did, ow, but he made her pay for it. And they're singing Friendship, and he's poking her in the eye and doing this while she's trying to sing and turning her around and pulling her hat off. And they got each other good. The friendship remained, but the rivalry also remained. A lot of It's a Mad, 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 Mad World was shot on location. Some of it in Santa Monica, a lot of it on the roads leading to Palm Springs from Los Angeles, some of it in Palm Springs, the area itself, other areas, the Palm Springs, the airfield near Palm Springs, the Burbank airport. So very little of this was really in a studio. A lot of it was outdoors. And they had these great big refrigerated, like trucks, so that these actors, none of whom were terribly young, except for Dorothy Provine, wouldn't pass out or die from the heat. And that's where their makeup mirrors were. That's where they got made up. That's where their costumes were. So Milton felt Ethel was scene grabbing. So Milton knew that Ethel, on her days off, because not everybody worked every day, was getting some dental work done in Los Angeles. So they're all of them are sitting, getting made up. And Milton says, "Oh, yeah, I met this awful quack dentist in Los Angeles who ruined my mouth and made everything so painful, and I couldn't talk for weeks, and it cost me and it's this doctor Merman's going to, it's dentist Merman's going to get her all afraid. And of course, she goes to her, the dentist, and he said, I've never been with Milton Berle. I think someone's playing a joke on you. So the next time they're all together, Merman said, I'm glad that although everybody else in this film is getting billing alphabetically, I'm getting special billing, specially starring Miss Ethel Merman, which wasn't true either. But she knew Milton's ego that if she was getting special billing, he'd want special billing. And he went to Stanley Kramer and completely embarrassed himself because he was bringing to him something that wasn't true. Because they were all, you know, uh, and so there was that kind of backstage rivalry nonsense going on, which worked for their characters because Merman was playing Mrs. Marcus, which inferred that she might be Jewish, a shrew of a woman who is browbeating this son-in-law of hers. We find in the story that he's just himself had a nervous breakdown. He went screaming naked through the streets. This trip is supposed to calm his nerves. And now they're in this intense, the complete opposite of what the doctors wanted for him. And Merman is just like taking a whip and lashing him. Faster, go on, go on, go on. Hurry up, we're going to lose it. Hurry, hurry, hurry. And one of the funniest lines, and I cannot think of anyone but Ethel Merman who could have made this funny, when they walk away from the accident and Milton Berle throws off a line, oh, these things happen. And she starts in, these things happen. Because when these things happen, people say these things happen. And that's why these things happen. I can't think of anyone else who could have pulled that off, including me, and made it real. Because that kind of screeching thing, you have to really believe what you're doing or it doesn't come off. She believed because she was also good at subtlety. Later in the film, Dick Shawn plays her handsome, muscular, they imply drug addicted, sex addicted son, who she calls to see if he can come help. And he's stoned. They can't say he's stoned. It's obvious he's stoned. And he's in a little teeny tiny bathing suit with a woman who was Fred Astaire's dancing partner later in life. And they're doing the twist. Now, any adult watching this, why would they be in bathing suits indoors twisting? They're having sex, but you couldn't show that in 1963. It's all inferred by the way they're dancing and what Dick Shawn is doing, pulsing, even doing this, which if you're an adult, you understand, he's either inferring masturbation or giving head, one way or the other. So Merman calls him to try to tell him what's going on. And he completely misconstrues the whole thing and overreacts. And Merman hangs up and just says, a moron, like his father, without the bombast, which makes it even funnier. Ethel Merman never gets the credit she deserves for being an actress and a comedian. 15 hit Broadway musicals. Yes, she had a singing voice like no other, perfect for Broadway. But she couldn't have been the lead in all of those shows if she wasn't funny. She could not have created Mama Rose and Gypsy and been so successful with it if she was not a magnificent dramatic actor. So her bombastic personality and her singing voice I think masked the other talents she had. Merman could have played heavy drum. Merman could have been in a sitcom. Lucille Ball tried. Lucille Ball created a sitcom for Merman, and it didn't sell. But it didn't sell because it was not well written, not because Merman wasn't good in it. So you have Ethel Merman bringing all of this to this film. She doesn't sing a note. Then you have subsidiary characters they come across, like Phil Silvers, like Don Knotts. You have wonderful William Demarest, who at this point was not starring yet in My Three Sons, but he'd been the star and the character actor in dozens of films, including the Jolson story. Had been in vaudeville, had been in silent films, a long career. He brought that to the screen. Zesu Pitts had been a silent film siren, a comedian in early sound films. In 1963, when this film, well, 62 when it was being made, she had just finished the Gail Storm show, playing Nuji, her best friend. So people knew who she was currently, and there she is, oh dear, doing all that stuff she did. That Olive Oil is based on, by the way. Olive Oil's voice is based on Zesu Pitts's vocal performance in
I had
early
no
sound
idea.
films. That's why you have me on the show.
That's
I,
why
I
I
don't
have you on.
I don't only stop the show and urinate, I also elucidate. So everybody you meet, and then in much smaller cameo roles, Jack Benny, Jerry Lewis, the Three Stooges. Just every time the camera, Ben Blue has a small part. And Ben Blue is a wonderful physical comedian who does wonderful physical comedy. And by the way, so does Merman. Merman gets lifted. She hides some keys in her very ample bosom. She gets lifted upside down with her breasts flopping up and down in her bra while I try to get the keys away from her. The last moment of the film, she slips on a banana peel and falls on her ass. Another thing, she's pushed forward and falls head over heels into a trash can. Merman didn't squawk. She understood it was the part, and she understood. She trusted Stanley Kramer because he was so good that she knew that this was going to be very, very, very funny. I don't mean to go on and on about Ethel, just she kind of sort of, if one person steals this film, it's Ethel Merman.
Oh, I would no, I agree. Yeah.
Dorothy Provine was a television actress who'd done some films, uh, never really became a big movie star. She's another straight man. She's not funny in this movie. She's just a pretty girl who's there, who adds a little bit of heart to this. Uh, Her best moment in the film is a little interaction she has with Spencer Tracy towards the end of the film when they find the money and her musing about all they'd gone through to get it and how she wishes that none of this had really happened. And she gave a little bit of heart to the film. I never knew her, so I don't have any Dorothy Provine stories. Um, why don't you look at that list you have of all the people who are in it? Let's bring up some more names.
Well,
And
one name I wanted to bring up, who was a small part in it, but still, it was towards the end of his career because he died a few years later. It was Buster Keaton, you know, an amazing talent. I think he died in 66, so he was before me.
he died in 66. Yes.
Yeah, let me see.
It
Yeah, you
wasn't
could.
Buster's. It wasn't Buster's last film because Buster was in Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum. That was the last.
Okay, okay,
That was the last
okay.
thing. Buster kind of resuscitated his career with television. Buster had his own TV series in the 1950s. It wasn't wildly popular, but he had it. And then he started making guest appearances on sitcoms and doing small parts in movies. And the different production companies would hire him to not perform, but to work with the performers on physical comedy. And that started long before this film. In fact, uh, Buster Keaton was on the payroll at MGM not to perform, but to teach other people, help other people to do physical comedy. And Buster worked with Lucille Ball at MGM in the 1940s when she was a movie star there. And Miss Ball always gave Buster credit that her facility with props, especially, and the physical things she did, it wasn't that she didn't have the talent, she did, but Buster helped bring it out in her. So uh, once she met Buster and started working with him in 1942, when she did comedy, it got funnier and funnier and funnier because he helped her just to bring out her own natural talent. And
Yeah.
he recognized that in her, she saw a mentor in him, and it worked. So it's one of the reasons why Buster's in this film. Buster did work with people on the film with the physical comedy. So he was also a comedy advisor, although he's not given any credit for that.
Another name I got to bring up, and this guy will be forever remembered for the nobody's perfect line at the pivotal moment in Some Like It Hot.
Yes.
Joe E. Brown. And I still will remember the first time I saw Some Like It Hot, and Jack Lemmon and Tony Curtis get off that train there, and you got Joey Brown and the other elderly, rich elderlies are like in sync going on the rocking chairs, and when he sees Jack Lemmon, the his facial reaction was so cartoonish and it worked, and he was so good, and uh that bit part that he had. And what a great closing line. And of course, he is in a mad, 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 mad world.
I can think of very few people because basically, Joey Brown in the film you're talking about, it's really one gay joke after another. The whole movie is really one gay joke after another, and one transvestite joke after another. And Joey Brown makes it quite clear that, and the way he says it, and the look on his face, that he always knew it was really a guy in drag, and that was fine with him. And that's how the movie ends. In the 1960s, late 50s, when they started doing some more adult stuff, in dramas, they could be a little more specific. A lot of Tennessee Williams's plays that became films had to get whitewashed a little bit because all of his film dealt with gay issues. And they kind of took the gay out of it. Oh, he's weak. He's a mama's, but not homosexual. And all you could do was play with it. You could, and then comedy even less so. You could make fun of, but you couldn't actually come out and say. So you inferred, and some of those inferences are brilliant. And you when you have actors like that, another person enormously talented and had not made a film in quite a while at that point was Eddie Anderson, who played Rochester on the Jack Benny show.
Hmm.
And he's in this. The minute you see him, you start laughing. The minute he opens his mouth and that voice comes out, it almost doesn't matter what he's saying, although he says funny things and does funny things. Uh, there are just these people are sprinkled like sprinkles on ice cream all over this film. As we've said, some of them say nothing or only have a line or two, or they have small parts, but they're hysterical because they're either bringing their personas with them, they're playing against type. That's the brilliance of the writing of the film. And we need to get just huge applause to the people who edited this film, because this film in its full length is like 2 hours and 45 minutes. It's a long film for a comedy. And you have what we call B-roll, things that are shot that don't really have any of the leads in it, things that are shot on location, and it may not always have been Mr. Kramer shooting some of the things to save money. If there's a car going down a street, he may have had his assistant director direct that while he was doing something else somewhere else. But then all of that has to get sewn together into one thing, one piece of cloth. So the editing is brilliant. I often watch things and go, oh, if they would have just done this, oh, if they would have just done that. Other than adding in Lucille Ball and Bob Hope, I can't imagine what more they could have done with the topic, how they could have made greed so funny. Everybody who does wrong in the film gets theirs. So whoever doesn't have a pure heart, whoever is being greedy, whoever is acting badly, either ends up in jail or ends up in a hospital with broken bodies. There is a scene, the last 15, 20 minutes of the film. I don't think I'm revealing anything here. So Spencer Tracy is this police captain uh, who has always wanted to capture this crook, who would like to retire. He finds out that they're taking away his pension. He finds out with phone calls that his daughter is running away from home and his wife is blaming him and his wife is divorcing him. All of this is happening in one day. This entire, all of we're talking about happens in one afternoon in the life of all of these people. So Spencer Tracy's character, Captain Culpepper, decides he's going to get the money for himself. So the one pure-hearted person in this turns and he starts chasing the bad guys with his own greed. And I defy any comedy director, any groups of writers. There is a scene where they are all hanging from, oh golly, I'm having a senior moment. Those metal things outside of windows.
I know what you're
Fire
talking
escape,
about. Yep.
fire escapes. They're
Yeah, there you
hanging from
go.
this long fire escape, and one by one, they're dropping off this thing. It is. See, so they have the real actors in the studio with close-ups. They have the location shots because this is an actual building. Then they make a model of the building and have stunt people going off, and they have dummies falling off. So it's the real people on location, the real people in the studio, stunt actors in the studio, stunt actors on location, a model with little itty bitty, and all of that is so brilliantly edited together that unless you're looking, like Sherlock Holmes, the magnifying glass, it's seamless. That is great direction. It's great direction and of course great editing. But the director has to have all of this in his head before he shoots it. For the editor edited together, the pieces have to be there. And Stanley Kramer brilliantly brought those pieces to the editor. And like most good directors, I don't know if you guys know this, most good directors sit with the editors while they're editing.
I've
When I've
heard that. Yep.
when I produced television through the years, when I was the producer or the writer even, I sat in the editing bay with the editor. No, 3 seconds too long. No, cut here. Hey, don't we have a thing we can add over? So you work with the editor if you have a good editor and if you have a good producer and director. Sometimes these guys, oh, I'm done. I'm going on to the next project. You do it. No, I never let anybody else. I relied on the talent of wonderful editors, but I was there with them doing the job with them to make sure we got the absolute positive best final product. And that's what Mr. Kramer did here.
Okay. Um, what about Peter Falk?
Peter Falk was really just starting to make a name for himself. He had been a theater actor who came to television. He had done some stuff. It's why his part is not very large. He's one of the He has an equal part to Eddie Anderson. He's a cab driver towards the end. Uh, his big breakthroughs were happening almost at the same moment. Um, a film of Betty Davis just before this, um, going to television, The Trials of O'Brien, and having, being long before any kind of Columbo or anything, people recognized that he had a flair for comedy and a flair for drama. And I
And he
don't
went
know,
from this to the Great Race.
yeah, I don't know of any other actor who had a glass eye, who used it to his own credit. When he wanted it to be invisible, unless you knew he had it, you really didn't know he had it. But when he wanted to make a comedy statement, all of a sudden, the two eyes didn't exactly work together. He had that much control over it and just subtly used it. It's like these were his circumstances. This is his palette of colors. And when he wanted that color, he wasn't afraid to color with it. Peter was, I mean, and Peter, he wasn't tall. When he was young, he had a nice body, but he wasn't greatly handsome. He was a nice looking Jewish guy. Um, but he became a sex symbol. That's a good actor. That's a good actor.
Yeah. How about Carl Reiner?
Carl was a day player in this, as was Paul Ford in the airplane scenes in the
Hmm.
control tower. Um, Carl, in this moment, was writing and sometimes directing, but mostly writing the Dick Van Dyke Show. He had not yet done The Russians Are Coming, The Russians Are Coming. He had not started directing films yet. His autobiography, Enter Laughing, had not been produced yet. So at this moment in time, Carl Reiner was known as a Broadway guy who got on television with Sid Caesar and was Sid Caesar's go-to guy on Your Show of Shows and Caesar's Hour, and had morphed into being a producer writer on television. So that's mostly what Carl was known for at this moment in time. It's why he's in there and why he has a smaller part. I'm sure if the movie had been made 10 or 15 years later, Carl Reiner would have had a much bigger part in the film. But he was happy for it. Everybody in Hollywood wanted to be in this film. Stanley Kramer and the casting people were getting phone calls. Isn't there something I can do in this? And in some cases, that's how they got on the film.
Okay. I am seeing a lot of names on here I don't recognize, but their names are standing out to me, and it's
Read them
kind of
out.
funny.
Read a name, and I'll see if I have a story. How's that?
Doodles Weaver.
Doodles Weaver was a comedy actor who was the brother of the NBC executive Pat Weaver, who helped invent the Tonight Show and the Today Show, and in the 50s kind of made NBC what it was. Sigourney Weaver's uncle.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And Doodles had some minor fame on television. Doodles had done some children's records. So he was working. He was a known entity. He wasn't a big star, but another one of those people who, in 1962, when the film was made, were known. Not necessarily huge stars, but another, oh, look who's there. Oh, quick, quick. Who was that? Oh, I've seen him. That was part of the fun. It was like, can you identify everybody? Give me another name.
Okay. Bobo Lewis.
Bobo Lewis, who was in this voice only. Bobo Lewis made a career on radio, on television, in some few films of playing the nagging with that voice. No matter what she said, she was annoying. And it worked. It was very, very funny. She always played the same kind of part. She was one of those people in Hollywood who were happily stereotyped, like Frank Nelson. Well, Mrs. Ricardo. No matter what show he was on, no matter what his character's name was, he was that guy. And there were people in show business who made a very nice living being that person. Bobo Lewis was that woman.
Okay. And I see some names I accidentally drifted over. Of course, you got Norman Fell.
Norman Fell was a very nice man who is what I call a journeyman actor. Yeah, he starred in The Ropers, which was a spinoff of help me out here.
Three's Company.
Three's Company. Thank you. Uh, it was never Norman Fell starring in except for The Ropers. He was the kind of guy they would hire to play comedy on a sitcom and then to do something very, very serious on the FBI or Mission Impossible or Mannix. And he worked steadily. People don't realize these character actors in those days, if you were talented and reliable, meaning you showed up early, you knew your lines, you weren't a pain in the neck to the director, you worked well with other actors, they worked constantly. It doesn't mean that they became wealthy, but they made enough money to buy a small house and get married and raise a family and, take a vacation every year and buy a new car every 3 years and send their kids to college. They didn't have maids and butlers, but they made a living. People like Charles Lane and William Shallert, who sometimes had big parts and sometimes just a voice, but so memorable that they kept working. That doesn't happen today. If you're on a sitcom and you play a part, they don't bring you in to play a different part 12 episodes later. You've been on it, that's it, move on. So character actors today don't work anywhere near as much as they did back in the times we're talking about. That's kind of the fun of this film is there were so many character actors in it who weren't Ethel Merman and Hello Dolly. They weren't the star over the they were but they worked. They worked so often that we instantly recognized them. And I don't think we have that same kind of thing anymore in Hollywood today.
I remember also Norman Fell in The Graduate.
Yeah.
Not a
Again,
big part, but boy, he stood out.
people who could take something small, do it really well, not overwhelm the other actors, but be really good. And they worked and they worked and they worked and they worked. And alas and alack, ask my character actor friends today who go for months and months without any work. It's not the same.
It's funny, you mentioned earlier about, I neglected to mention this, but reminded me of it. You mentioned Sid Caesar not remembering a lot about this film. It reminded me of a story I heard about Richard Dreyfuss and Whose Life Is It Anyway? Because apparently he doesn't remember anything about that film. Or
We're talking different generations, different
hmm
kinds of actors. I won't speak to that mostly because I didn't know Mr. Dreyfuss very well, and
hmm
I don't have anything. All I can do is speculate, and when I speculate, when we can talk about this for real. Um,
I almost got the chance to meet Richard Dreyfuss at Frightmare in the Falls, but he and the two other Jaws cast ended up canceling at the last minute. I don't know what the story was, but you know, but I often I've heard that story. And when you mentioned Sid Caesar, I was like, yeah, that reminds me of something.
You know what Richard Dreyfuss does for me? It reminds me that I take a daily diuretic who, for some reason today, is working overtime. So, folks, you're going to see a brilliant little edit here. He's going to stop recording for a second. And I am once
Okay, I'm gonna
again
I,
going,
I'm
wait,
gonna
wait, wait, wait. Let me give myself an out. I'm going to
okay.
go take care of business. And I'm going to
Yep.
be sitting here as if I've never left. And you know at home when you're watching this, only 1 minute went by. So, in 1 second, I'll see you in 1 minute.
All right. There we are.
See, you didn't even miss me. See how fast that was? You blinked, and here I am.
Skittles was asleep though.
Well, you know,
Skittles blinks a long time.
well,
He he
Skittles has pause. So Skittle paused, and I came back.
yeah, Skittles unblinks whenever he comes up and hassles me while I'm sleeping. Another name I was going to bring up from this film, a guy that is constantly turning 39. I know he's passed away, but I heard he's still 39, was Jack Benny.
And, Jack Benny is in a car witnessing something, and just they're rude to him, and well, he just brought in one little itty bitty bit, he brought the Jack Benny persona to the thing. He wasn't playing a character, he was playing the Jack Benny character. And he was so beloved and so well known that the audience was screaming, at when I was 4 years old. As soon as you saw him, the whole audience was like, whoa, because and applauding for him because he was there. I know of very few people in show business, both all the audience out there, God bless you, audience, we need you, but also all the people with whom he worked. There's not a bad word to say about Jack Benny. I've never heard anyone say, oh, he was really, no, he was really that talented, that smart, that nice, that good at what he did, that supportive of his writers, that supportive of his co stars. Um, I
Hmm.
wish I had been old enough. I got into show business the year after Jack Benny died. I never had the chance, and I would have loved to have just sat down and had a cup of coffee with him.
Yeah, just looking him up here. Yeah, I was 2 years old when he passed away.
I'm getting really tired of you reminding me how much younger you are than I am. So, and you look even younger. So,
Oh, yeah, well, I don't feel it. You're probably in better shape than I am. So, you saw this when
yes.
you saw this when the film came out in
Yes, I
that.
did.
Now, talk about that experience. What do you remember about
Well,
seeing it?
there was no way to be prepared for it because there had not been a film like this. All the three of us kids knew about it was that it was going to be funny, that it was slapstick. We, the three of us, loved slapstick comedy. We watched The Three Stooges and Laurel and Hardy every day at home. In New York City, they were on every day. And we I knew much more of the people on the screen than they did. We were very, very close. One of them is gone now. The other one, in fact, I'm Geoffrey Mark because he's Jeffrey Keith. That's how we were, when parents yelled, that's how we knew which one of us they were yelling for. Um, they did not recognize as many people. I knew almost everyone on the screen. I may not have known their name. Like I didn't know Ben Blue's name, but I knew who that was. So it became a game for me. All right, who's in this? and to get lost in that "who have I seen before" thing. Even at 4, it was there. That was there for me. It was part of what made the film charming for adults who did know these people and had watched these people from silent films. So, from the 20s to the 60s, that almost 40 years of space there, of people who loved it. Our fathers laughed hysterically at it. It was fun to watch them laughing. I think it was the first film I'd ever seen that had an intermission where you got up and went to the bathroom and bought candy. Believe me, they bought candy. We made sure of that. And then it had a little musical interlude, an entr'acte, so to speak, for the next part of the film. Uh, I do remember at 4 getting a little lost in the plot because it was so long that I would like why where are they exactly here? It wasn't all the references to where they were and the adult humor that was in it wasn't necessarily very clear to me. But that's why this film does so well because little kids can watch it just for the wonderful slapstick. And young people can watch it for the sexual innuendos, and older people watch it to enjoy all these wonderful performers. There's something in this film for everybody.
Hmm.
So, yay.
Well, I'm going to tell you, it says something about your intellect that even though you said you weren't getting all that, the fact that you were following along and getting what you did. You say, I remember at 4 years old, I mean, that was the year before I went to kindergarten. And the only thing I remembered is struggling, especially um, how do I word this? I don't know whether it's OCD or attention deficit or whatever it was I had. And that was affecting me a lot. And I got of course, my release through movies that normally
Yeah.
things had to be really simple for me to keep with them, but now it's a little different. But
Look, it's part of what's special about me, and I'm not taking any bows. It just is. I told my first joke before my second birthday.
oh wow.
I mean, I don't mean I heard a joke and repeated it. I mean, I made a funny, witty comment. I made a witticism before my second birthday, right before my second birthday. We were in Brooklyn, New York. It was Indian summer. It's my birthday's in September. It was warm. We were downstairs on the stoop of our house, and the people next door were also, enjoying nice balmy weather right before it was to start getting cold. And it was an older woman who needed some medication, and she reached through her kitchen window to get it on the windowsill, but she couldn't see like what it said how to take it. And my father, trying to embarrass me, handed me the bottle and said, "Jeff, what does it say?" I looked at the bottle, I looked at the bed, and I said, "I left my reading glasses upstairs." Okay. I am like 23 months old at this point. So my awareness started much earlier
Wow.
than most children's did. Because I remember being potty trained. I remember the diapers. I go back to being 9 months old. I remember what was happening. I remember not being able to talk and being frustrated by it. Because I wanted to
Must
talk,
have
I
done
just
really
couldn't get
well in
out.
school.
Yeah, that's why I was done at 15.
Were
I
you
had to get,
really?
I was in college at 15. Yeah.
Oh, wow. No
So
wonder
that's
you're a genius when you come on here.
Thank you. Yeah, look, this is not about the film. We'll make this very short because I want to keep to the film because who
Hmm.
cares about my childhood? But yeah, they did the usual testing in schools, and my IQ is about 163, so it falls into the genius category, and that and $5 will get me a cup of coffee at Starbucks. So it helps my career. I'm grateful for the intellect. Like I'm grateful for the talent, or we're both good looking men, grateful for that. But those are all gifts. It's what you do with all that stuff you can take a bow for, but just that you have it.
I never knew that about you though. Now I really get it. Um, why when I have you on here to talk about like I mostly stay silent because I just want to hear you tell the story because you're great with it, you know? Now
I
this
think,
makes sense.
but I think storytelling is another talent.
Hmm.
You know, when I do stand up, when I'm a comedian in a nightclub, I don't really tell jokes. I tell stories.
Hmm.
Uh, and I riff with the audience, like what's interesting to them and what are they doing. And I do that. I don't really have an act, but I tell stories. I've been being told for a very long time that I'm a good storyteller. I think it's why I'm a good writer. My books have done, best-selling stuff. But again, it's a gift. Uh, a lady can have enormous breasts and she literally can't take a bow, but she can't take a bow because they're a gift. I mean, she did nothing to deserve them. Just there they are. Or men who are, you know, blessed between the legs, or now a bodybuilder has done work to get that way. Having talent is great. And everybody, so I'm going to bring us back to the film. Everybody in this film was born with great talent, but they did the work to develop it.
Hmm.
And they learned, all of these people, because they wouldn't have been hired, how to be a professional in show business, how to read a script, how to develop a character, how to show up on time, how to do this, how to do that. And oh, a pussycat.
Skittles, you had to make a cameo.
He always does.
Just like in a mad world, you have to make a cameo.
Look, it's Skittles. He
Skittles is
always
like,
wants to be on when I'm on with you. He always wants to be in the
oh,
picture.
he's on pretty much when anybody's on here. Skittles makes a cameo.
Well, we get to enjoy Skittles and we get to watch your biceps move as you pet the cat. So it's win-win for everybody.
I always look
I
at it this way when Skittle passes away, I'll have the memories of him on here. So, you know, I'm always delighted when he comes around. He's rubbing against my fingers right now, you know. So it's like, yeah, you embarrassed me, but I forgot all about it already. But I was,
But
yeah.
the professionalism. You cannot make a film like Mad World without professionalism.
Hmm.
If the actors in this film had wasted time, it would have been wasted money, and Mr. Kramer could never have finished the product properly. So that was the other thing. He picked people he knew. You hire William Demarest, you know you're going to get full bore everything he's got. Spencer Tracy, who had an alcohol problem and some other health issues. And yet Stanley Kramer hired him time and time. And I think they made 5 films altogether together because he knew that Spencer was a total bro who would bring everything he knew. Because that's also part of acting, whether it's drama or comedy. The writing has to be there, but then the actor has to pull from, if they're a good actor, everything they've ever seen, everything they've ever heard, everything they've ever experienced that might be right for the character. And that's what you've got in Mad World. And then you have other actors who are playing a stereotype that they live on. And it works. Both things work in this film. That's why this film is so good. It works on so many different levels at the same time.
I was gonna ask too, how many times, or do you know how many times you saw this in the theater, like throughout your life?
In the theater only, not on television or
Yeah,
not on
in the
DVD.
theater, in the theater.
I think in the 1960s, I saw it 4 times. I saw it in the 1970s at an art house in New York once. I have so badly wanted to, and I just every time this happens, I can't get there. The film, oh, we should talk about the film's debut. There's great stories there. The film was the opening film at the Cinerama Dome in Hollywood. The original film was shot in Cinerama. So to sit there with the screen coming all the way around you like this, you are enveloped in the screen and the sound. I've never seen the film shown that way. The theaters I saw the film in were not Cinerama theaters, so I saw it flat. Uh, when the film debuted, Jerry Lewis, who had a cameo appearance in the film, at that moment in time had a 2 hour variety show, the Jerry Lewis Show. The show was terrible, but he covered the opening. So that his cameras were there as all these stars went in to watch the film. And then he got, I want to say, I know it was Ethel Merman and I think Phil Silvers to leave the opening early and come to his show and perform and publicize the film. And Merman came on and did a medley of her hits. And Jerry had her covered by, I think, 9 different cameras, all every pot and cut. I wish people could see that performance of Merman's because she was so enthused by having this great film opening and being in it and then being on Jerry Lewis live and one of her best television performances. And Phil Silvers was hysterical. So there was a great deal of publicity about the film opening. And it was one of those water cooler things where you weren't cool if you couldn't, have a cup of coffee with your office mates. Oh, well, I saw it. I saw it last week. I saw it, I saw it a year and a half before it opened. That's how early I saw it. People bragged about having seen the film, especially if they saw it on the East Coast in Manhattan, in Cinerama, in Chicago, in Cinerama, as opposed to how I saw it at your neighborhood theater. But they have reshown the film at the Cinerama Dome several, and every single time they've done it, I've been working the same day, and I couldn't get there to see it. One of these days, they're going to have it at the Cinerama Dome, and I want to go there and experience it the way the original first audience saw it. I
There
don't
you
know.
go. Wow. Now, do you have I don't know what your physical media is like, but did you have it like on VHS and Laserdisc and DVD, Blu-ray and stuff like that?
Well, the film was shown on television, on network television for the first, so I saw it there on television. The film, the shorter version of the film was eventually syndicated, so local stations could show it. When VHS tapes, when VCRs were invented, I believe it came out on Beta first. I never had a Betamax.
Neither did
Then it
I.
came out on VHS. So I had a copy on VHS, still the shorter version. I never had a laser disc player.
Neither
And
did
then when it came out on DVD and it was the extended version, the whole thing. And then the DVD has wonderful interviews with people. But by the time it came out, I had already talked to these people myself. So I was hearing on the extra added attractions stories I had already heard. And I, I'm not obsessed by this movie. My friend Mark Evanier, who is a wonderful writer and comic book guy, and he's constantly working. He's been part of Hollywood and variety shows, and working longer than I am.
I. Hmm.
He is obsessed with this thing. I think it really is a shame that this film never got a good book written about it, and that I don't know anyone other than I who has interviewed all these people and have all these stories. Unfortunately, because we're all getting older, I don't know that a book about Mad World could be published today. I don't know who would buy it necessarily because we're talking about people. that a lot of people don't know who they are anymore. Even Jack Benny, Ethel Merman, Mickey Rooney, Phil Silver, Sid Caesar. You mentioned those names to young people. You know I have grandchildren, and
Mhm.
they know Lucy because they know Papa wrote a book about her. They know Ethel Ella or because Papa wrote books about them, but their own personal experience, nothing. They don't know any of these people, or who Milton Berle was, or I would tell stories and have to explain. So it is a shame that when more of us baby boomers were around and active, a good book had not been written. I'd love to, hey, book publishers out there, you think this would make a good book? I would love to write it. So if you're listening and watching and think this is a good idea, uh, contact Greg, and Greg will give you my contact information. I'd love to write a book. And honestly, I didn't pre-plan this. We're just talking, and it just occurred to me. I would love to write a book about this
I
film.
think you should.
I know the Kramer family would be behind it. Uh, that they'd love to see a really good book written about it. So, hey, guys out there, guys, gentlemen and ladies out there in the publishing world, hey, I'm dangling the carrot. So I hope somebody takes a bite.
I hope so too, because I think this is definitely one of the most important comedies of the 1960s and period, you know.
Well, let me ask you a question. You're younger than I am. And how did you first see this film?
Oh, gee.
Come on, come on. You got to answer fast. This is television. You got to answer.
TV. I don't remember. Like, I know I had an uncle that had a video store from 81 to 88, but I don't recall seeing it there. Um,
Well, to the best of your knowledge, was this film as big in Canada as it was in the US?
that's funny you ask that because I wouldn't have any knowledge of that. I know it was a huge comedy. I've been very fortunate, and I really got to credit Alfred Hitchcock on this because when attended a screening of Psycho at a midnight screening in 1996, I had no desire to see anything in black and white. I had no desire to see anything that I considered old.
Yeah. See?
Then I saw Psycho and I was so mesmerized by it. I was like, wow, I wanted to see more Hitchcock movies. Hitchcock introduced me to James Stewart, Cary Grant, Grace Kelly. I'm so glad he introduced me to Grace Kelly. So many fantasies there. Um, and of course, their films introduced me, and of course, Mad World come into the picture as well, because I was starting to, and I got a big appreciation, especially uh, going back, like films of the 50s and 60s. I'm never shy about watching. 40s are really good as well. But and I get it, some people have their cutoff line, this and that. I try never to do that.
Well, good is good.
Yeah,
And every generation or every decade, however you want to look at film, we're being specific to film here, they're all a good film is a good film. If it was a good film in 1930, it's still a good film. If it was, however, good only in, oh, a talkie, woo woo, but it
yeah.
doesn't hold up, that's a different story. Then it wasn't a good film, it was a novelty. So there are grade B films from the 30s and 40s and 50s. I look at them and I can enjoy them. And I go, well, you know, in a movie theater, for those of you out there, maybe you don't know this, you went to the movies in the 30s and 40s and 50s and into the 60s, and you saw a cartoon, you saw news of the day or a travel log, you saw a short film, You saw a longer grade B film that was maybe an hour and 10 minutes. Then you saw the main attraction. You got all of that for your 35 cents.
Oh, wow.
So, going to the movies was an event and much, much different than it is if anyone even goes to the movies anymore.
I
Everyone's watching
still
everything
do,
on
but
platforms. I've
yeah.
stopped. I've stopped. I really, maybe I'm just getting lazy in my old age, but I can sit with a big screen TV here in my recliner and watch at my leisure when I have the time to watch it and not get all dressed up and not put on the sequins and not have to if I don't feel like dealing with the public and just enjoy something.
Hmm.
But the platforms out there now are showing, and Mad World, by the way, is on several platforms. So whichever platforms you guys watching us right now have, you can find Mad World on almost all of them. Some of them, if you're paying a premium for it, you can see the film without any commercials. Others, you're going to see some commercial breaks. So this film is very accessible to all you guys. This is not something from 60 something years ago where you can't find it and you have to go out and buy. No, no, just turn on your platforms and they're there, and it's the uncut version. So
I hope to see this in the theater some point, though.
well, you
Like
know
when
what?
I,
So here we're going to put this into the universe, Greg. They're going to have the film at the Cinerama Dome in Los Angeles, and you're going to fly here, and we're going to go together. How's that?
well, we can make that happen. I don't know what my schedule's going to be like, but I think that would be awesome. But really, though, if it had it not been for the Hitchcock screening, I probably would have maintained an ignorance. And I think the reason I went to the Hitchcock screening was like, gee, here's a chance to see this renowned film. And I had not seen it at the time. And I was like, gee, I could see this up on the big screen. Let's go. And so I went, and I'm so glad I did because it
You know,
changed. I would not be interested in a mad, 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 mad world had it not been for that.
you and I have touched on this topic before, but let's
Yeah.
revisit it. When I speak to my peers, meaning people of my age,
Hmm.
especially those who grew up in New York City or Chicago or Toronto or big cities all over Northern America. In early television, because they needed to fill time and they needed to fill time with products that weren't very expensive. I'm not talking about prime time at night. I'm talking about during the day and weekend days. They showed Al Jolson films. They showed Fanny Brice films. They showed Eddie Cantor. They showed Zasu Pitts and Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton. They showed the early talkies. They showed the great MGM musicals. They showed the wonderful RKO 1930s movies. They showed the Universal Studios horror films, The Mummy and Dracula and Frankenstein and King Kong. And we as children in these big cities got to see what was really our grandparents' era of entertainment. Then, if you watched primetime entertainment, you got to see what our parents really liked, or you got to watch reruns of television shows from the 1950s that were now being shown in the 1960s. My Little Margie and Our Miss Brooks and December Bride and all these things. And I know folks who, what, where, trust me, they were big, 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 big hits in that moment. And then a little later on, you'd watch The Tonight Show or you'd watch The Ed Sullivan Show or The Hollywood Palace, and you'd see young performers. You'd see the Beatles, you'd see Elvis Presley, you'd see the Mamas and the Papas and Tom Jones and Donovan and whoever was. We were brought up with three generations of entertainment available on that box. And all we had to do was walk over to it, turn it on, wait for the tubes to warm up, and then physically turn the channels. And you had 13 possibilities. Most cities only had three. The
I
larger cities,
remember
the larger cities had five or seven. And then in Canada, you had the CBC, and then whatever came from the United States up to Canada. And then you also had some BBC shows that we didn't get here.
we
Uh,
had two channels growing up, 4 and 9, I remember.
CBS, NBC, and ABC were the major networks. There had been a network called the Dumont Network in the 50s that folded. And anything that wasn't associated with one of those three networks was called a local station who provided their own programming. And what was their own programming? Kiddie shows with local hosts, news programs, sports programs, and reruns of old television and reruns of classic old films. Sometimes it was Spencer Tracy, and sometimes it was the Bowery Boys, or it was, some Ann Miller movie from 1941 that no one will even watch anymore. My point was that we were exposed to, so for 4-year-old Jeff, or Jeffrey Keith, my bigger brother guy, who's, 6.5 or something at that point, we had seen all these people. We knew who Rochester was. We knew who Zesu Pitts was. It wasn't like who we if we didn't know their names, we'd seen all of these folks perform somewhere in our purview. And I think we have a leg up on young people today. It isn't that we didn't have our own stars. It isn't that we didn't have our own sounds, our own music, our own culture as young people. We did. Sometime have me on. We'll talk about the Studio 54 days because I
Hmm.
was there and what all that wildness was about. But I'm talking about having an awareness of what came before and understanding that entertainment culture changes and morphs. And we got to see the whole 20th century up till the moment we were born of how it had changed. And then we got to watch it change very rapidly in the 1960s, right before our eyes. And Mad World is right there. It's right there where everything was changing. Mad World is before President Kennedy's assassination. It's before the British invasion, but it's right before. It's right before the civil rights movement got violent and necessary. It's before the women's rights movement. It's before gay rights. Women were still housewives. They weren't mostly not working yet. Our culture hadn't changed. That film is right there. It is sitting on the precipice of change and is reflective of everything that culturally had come before. Maybe that's why I've never thought about this before. Maybe that's why it stands up so well. There's a little bit of everything in the culture of the film from the 20th century, from 1900 up to 1962, when the film was being filmed. So it took a long time to make the film. Uh, I feel a little badly for young people sometimes. No offense, guys. I'm not putting you down. This is not your fault. It's the fault of the media that you aren't given access to all of this wonderful stuff. And then you can choose what you like and what you don't like. And you can hear music and go, oh, the music I like today, I hear the beginnings of that back in the 90s or the 70s or the 60s. Oh, I get it. It fills in blanks. I've always felt history, period, was very important. If you don't know history, you're doomed to repeat it. But in the entertainment world, it's very important for people in the business to know what came before because nothing is a completely original thought. Everything derives from something, and then you add something new to it, and it becomes something else. Even the great performers, you can look at them and see what their influences are. Everybody in this film had an influence from someone who came before them. And yet each one of these people like Dolly Levi says in Hello Dolly, twisted it a little, turned it a little, shaped it a little, molded it a little into something new. But if you want to make a diamond, you still have to work from coal. You know, the root is still there no matter how you're doing it. End of rant.
Well, we definitely live in a mad world today, you know. So, not that I want to get into politics, but still, the film was fu funny on its own, so we don't need to get into that depressing stuff. But,
Yeah, there was almost nothing political about the film. The
hmm
only thing that was a little political was its inferences to what this poor guy, this police captain, had to deal with locally, his local politics, where he was being threatened with being having his pension taken away. And he got his pension back because his buddy blackmailed the mayor because it's inferred in the film. They don't quite say it that the mayor had been caught in a house of prostitution and that this other guy knew about it and had the paperwork, and all of a sudden the pension was reinstated. So that's about as far as the politics go, the skullduggery that goes on behind the scenes of some government things. But other than that, it is satire on our society as it was in the moment. It was a farce. And there used to be this, and people misquoted, farce is what closes on Saturday, meaning farce is very hard to do because you're doing a twisted reflection of something. And unless it's brilliantly written and brilliantly acted, it can end up being very empty and close, meaning a Broadway show closing. This never closes. It's a mad world is always open. It's appearing somewhere. It's available somewhere all the time. And I would love, again, to see a book while Karen Sharp, who is Stanley Kramer's widow, is alive and well, God bless her. And she is alive and well and still beautiful. Um, those of you who are fans of the sitcom I Dream of Jeannie, Karen Sharp played Major Nelson's fiance in the first few episodes before they dropped the character. And they dropped the character because Karen walked away because she didn't want to play second fiddle to Barbara Eden. So, because her husband was Stanley Kramer, she didn't need to do it. While she's around, and wonderful Kat Kramer, her daughter, who's a celebrity in her own right, and a comedian, and a interviewer, and a producer and stuff. I would love to see this film get the respect and its place in show business history that it
I think
deserves.
you should do it.
Well, I'll have to talk to my literary agent and see, because unfortunately, guys, books like this, to write a book about Mad World would take a couple of years to do it properly, and
Hmm
I'm not going to spend a couple of years of my life to write a book that isn't going to sell. So I have to find out if there really is a market. Maybe you guys, if you want to see a book like this, let Greg know. Maybe just by fans telling us, yes, write that book. We can take that to a publisher and say, look, I have all these Canadian fans out there who would love to see a book written. Let's write that book. So that's how stuff is done sometimes by popular demand.
Yeah. I should see too if I could get one of the Kramers to come on in tribute to Stanley, if they'd be
I
open
would
to it.
imagine you could go. Harlan Bowl is my publicist, and Harlan
Hmm
knows these people, and I'm sure if they're willing to do it, I'm sure Kat would do it. I don't know
Yeah.
if Karen would. I don't think she does very many interviews anymore. But Kat's like I am. She loves to be on television and podcasts, and of course it's her father. Why wouldn't she want to?
How was Harlan anyway? I know he had a rough year, but I've seen some recent pictures on Facebook. He seems to be good spirit, especially well, why wouldn't he around you, you know?
God, see, this is why we love each other. For those of you who are wondering what the hell are you guys talking about, Harlan Bowl is my publicist and one of my closest friends. Harlan, unfortunately, owned a home in Altadena, California that was completely burned to the ground in the fires that we had just a few months ago. And devastating to him, he lost so much of what was his career in that. Harlan had awards. Harlan had one of a kind show business memorabilia pieces. Uh, I cannot imagine if this happened to me to own a home and then go back to it after a fire. All that was left of the home was some of the fireplace and a little metal plaque he had next to his front door. Everything else looked as if someone had dropped a bomb on it during World War II, and it was just rubble. Now, Harlan, without all of this stuff happening, works like 47 hours a day. He has a long list of clients. All of us get treated beautifully. And I think he didn't work for a day. Maybe it was 2 days before he was back at work. He's an amazing, tall, handsome, intelligent, talented man with a heart of gold. And probably, if we're talking about ethics and morals, the most ethical human being I know. And when you see bad stuff happen to wonderful people, you just shrug. And all I can do is be there for him when he has time for friends and love him and pray for him and be amazed how functioning he is considering all he's dealing with. Because clothing, furniture, paintings, I mean, all of it just gone. And
He was always good to me. Like I said, I remember,
that's how you and I
uh,
met.
yep, yeah, and also who connected me also with Peter Mark Richmond. That was awesome too.
Who we lost a few years ago. It's a
Yeah,
lovely man. I liked him a lot too.
yeah,
But
yeah,
no, I'm grateful. Harlan has introduced me to a lot of people. I probably would never have met Greg. I would never be on the Python's Paradise uh, without Harlan. And look at the friendship that has grown between us and how many times I've been on your I think I am your most frequent guest of all.
yeah.
Well, that's other than the chemistry between Greg and me, Harlan. So I think a very well-known celebrity before I met Harlan, before Harlan came into my life about 20 years ago. And Harlan, if I can use the word without sounding egotistical, Harlan took me from celebrity and maybe into a star. And how can I not be grateful to him just for that? But he's also been a splendid, splendid friend away from the business.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, you know what? It's been wonderful having you come on here and talk about it's a mad, 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 mad world. And wow, like looking over that, like you don't see uh big comedies like this made much anymore, if at all. And
No, they can't afford it. They
yeah,
can't afford it. Financially, Mad World, another on the precipice. If we can take 5 more minutes here.
sure.
The movie industry that most people think of, even though they don't necessarily want to watch those films, they think that's how the films are still made. There were a dozen or so studios who literally owned land with sound stages, which is called a studio. And these dozen or so had on weekly salary actors, singers, dancers, comedians, writers, directors, producers, makeup people, sound people, costumers, hairstylists, their own fire department, their own medical department, warehouses full of props and furniture and stuff. And you made whatever films the higher ups decided to make. They assigned people to these films. That's how films used to be made. So if one film didn't do as well as another, well, the other one made up for it financially. And you weren't paying people by picture, picture by picture. They were on a weekly salary. So that all of these craftspeople and actors had a steady income. Maybe if they had been on individual, they would have made more money per film, but they didn't have to wait from film to film to have income. The income was there every week. Well, if you want to make a film like Mad World, it has an enormous budget for all the talent and all the crafts. And it's on, half this film is on location, if not more. That's even more expensive because you had United Artists paying for it. Today, some of the studios physically still exist. Paramount has closed down. Paramount Studios, it's there, but no one's working there anymore. Um, MGM exists as a corporation, but there's no MGM studio anymore. And on and on and on and on and on. There are very few actual working studios. And it's individual productions where producers raise money together and then production companies. That's why you watch films today. Sometimes the most creative part is all the different logos, all the different production companies put up there first. And you go, why didn't you spend that on the film? Why did you spend so much on your logo? And there's only so much money to go around. And there's no guarantee that the film will be shown anywhere. The movie studios owned their own movie theaters. So all these films were guaranteed to play and make money. Today you make a film and it's a crapshoot. And today you make a film, and I think two-thirds of them are going right to platforms now.
Yeah, I don't like that.
But that's how it is. So the idea, Carol Burnett said a wonderful thing. For those of you who don't know, Carol Burnett for 11 seasons had her own variety show on television on CBS. Big, 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 big hit. Wonderful show. And Carol had Harvey Korman and Vicki Lawrence and Lyle Waggoner and Tim Conway. And for a little while there, Dick Van Dyke. She had a full orchestra with Peter Matz. She had a full set of singers and dancers. And Bob Mackey doing all her costumes and a long list of writing staff. And Carol said, that show can't be done today. No one can afford 20 musicians. No one can afford a guy who arranges music every week or has 15 singers and dancers doing a routine every week. And all of those people have to get costumed, and sets have to be built, and props have to be gotten, and the 13 writers. The only show that's still doing that is Saturday Night Live. And they only have like 15 episodes a year. It may seem like they're on all year long. They're not really on all year long. And it's shot at NBC Studios. Uh, it, it makes so much money for NBC that NBC, the show could even run in the red and NBC would still make money from it. So a film like Mad World, you'd have to go to one of those billionaires we keep seeing in the news to get enough money to make. I honestly, off the top of my head, don't know what it costs to make Mad World. If one looks on IMDb, it'll tell you how much it cost, what the budget was. But Mad World could cost $100 million to make today. And where are people getting $100 million for a slapstick comedy farce? So it is a film of its time. It is a film of the end of the great old-fashioned movie studio system. Right around the time this film was being made, the studios were starting to break up a little bit. And by the end of the 60s, it was gone. Almost all the actors have been fired, and these studios began just renting space out, or they were doing television, and they paid for that, and they kept a small group of people. But the great day of movie making in that system was just about to end, and Mad World just creeped in there to get all the goodies the system had to offer before it ended. So, in a
Yeah.
way, it is part of the end of that kind of show business story. Again, I hadn't thought about it in that way either, but we're talking about it, and all of these wonderful things I'm saying for the first time. I've never been interviewed about Mad World at length like this before. So, really and truly, a lot of what I'm saying are conclusions I'm coming to folks live here as we're talking with Greg.
Well, I love the fact that we could do this, and you're always a wonderful guest, and for me, like I hear a lot of times, and I've heard podcasters will say, um, the guest talks too much, or guest talk, and they don't say it about my show. They'll say it about their own show. And I'm like, you know what? That's what the audience wants to hear. They want to hear the guest. They. So one of the things I love about having you come on the show is that I can ask very brief questions and just let you go with it. And I know you're
Well,
going to deliver gold every time.
well,
It's about
God
the
bless.
same. It's about the same as me giving somebody $1 and they're giving me $10.
Wow, what a great compliment. Thank you. You know, there's not a secret. I've said this to you before on the air. Something I learned from Milton Berle.
Mhm.
And he said to me, hopefully, when you're being interviewed, you got a good interview who knows the subject, who knows what you've done, or if it's a book or a film, whatever you've done, they know about it and they can ask good questions. Let them talk if they're good. If they aren't good, give them one question and take over. Just verbally shove them out of the way because your job here, you're not there just to answer questions. You're there to entertain the folks who are watching.
Mhm.
And if the host isn't going to be entertaining, you'd better blankety blank do it. And I saw Milton do that on television where he would be interviewed by local people or they give him 1 minute and went to the weather. And Milton all of a sudden was in front of the weather map because he wasn't done and he was Milton Berle. And whether you liked what he did or not, you were going to remember it. So when I have people like you, where I give the space to ask good questions and I trust that they'll be good,
Mhm.
I do. And where I get people, because I do a lot of interviews every year and I do my own interviews. Will give me a commercial right before the end here. Uh, if they're not good, I just like, so Jeff, tell me about, yes, I would love to. And then I talk for an hour. I don't
Mhm.
even give them the space. If someone asks, what's it like being a star? I go, oh crap. This person doesn't know what I do, didn't come prepared, but those folks are watching. I owe them entertainment. That's what I do. That's what I do. And it's easy with you because we're comfortable with each other.
Mhm.
Uh, I always compliment your looks on the air. You're about the sexiest today I've ever seen you. So whatever you're doing, keep doing it because you look great.
I got
It
Chantal
is.
Kraviazik on my shirt.
It's got nothing about what's on your shirt. It's you. It's a good look.
I
The
think
head.
I think it's Skittles.
No, I still think it's you. And so, Jeff, where can people find you if they want to? Besides my, well, I'm so glad you asked, Greg. So I have a
I,
week. I have a weekly podcast called Geoffrey Mark Plays Ella, where I play the
Mhm.
music of Ella Fitzgerald and tell you insider stories about it because I've written two books about the lady and worked with her at the end of her career. On every platform, those shows are available. We have two full seasons for you to choose from. We are working on a new version where it's going to be video, and I'm going to have the occasional guest star talking about their favorite Ella music. We have not released those yet, but they are coming. Every week, I am a co host on Still Toking, where two handsome, intelligent potheads who have created this wonderful aura around them. And they are comic book writer and artists. They've written a novel together. all about stoned zombies that is very popular. And the guests are show business people and political people and the great thinkers and movers and shakers of our time. And I am there to ask good questions and flirt with everybody. And that's on usually Wednesdays, 4 o'clock Pacific time, whatever time it is in your time zone. This week will be on Tuesday at 4 o'clock because there's a conflict. So look for us, your time zone this Tuesday. And find me on Facebook, Geoffrey Mark. Find me on Instagram, Geoffrey Mark Showbiz. Turn on your electric toothbrush. I'll be happy to be there. And I love being with Greg Gilbert.
I love having you come on here as well. How was your Easter, by the way?
It was quiet.
I
Um,
slept most of mine.
I did cook for Passover and had some friends over.
Mhm.
Uh, Easter, I actually worked. I was on WGN in Chicago and heard by about 1.5 million people for Easter. So I did that, and then without being gross, I try to keep. I'm Jewish. I try to keep Passover. Matzah is delicious if you know what matzah is, folks. But matzah in your digestive system is like cement. So uh, Jews would take over the world, except Passover keeps us from going to the bathroom for so long that Christians do much better than we do. Um, so I enjoy Passover, but I look forward to eating real food and going to the bathroom again. Perhaps that's why I had to pause here twice. So my Easter was quiet, contemplative, contemplative. Uh, I was not brought up with the traditions of the bunnies and the flowers and the eggs and things. But on Easter, I do ponder the story of Easter and
Mhm.
what it means to me personally and my personal spirituality. So a great deal of Easter was my thinking about my life, my spirituality, and like, okay, what's coming up for Jeff? What does Jeff have to do? Where does Jeff have to improve? That kind of thing.
There you go.
There
There
I go.
you go. Well, you know what, Jeffrey, this was fascinating, and I enjoyed hearing your stories. And I hope there is an audience for that book. I think it would be fantastic. I think, like, you've got just have so many channels of, you mentioned one cast member, and it's like you could just go off, and I think that's amazing. So,
Well, it all depends on fan input and whether my literary agent and publishers are willing to pay me to write a book like that. I would, don't get me wrong, I'd love to do it and I think I would do it well, but I can't do it for free. So, I make my living doing this kind of stuff. So we'll see. But seriously, folks, if you're a fan of Greg's or a fan of mine, get in touch with Greg and let him know you'd like to see it. And he'll pass the information on to me and I'll share that with the powers that be. And maybe the other than entertaining you, I hope we have maybe the best thing out of this more than 2 hour interview with Greg is a book will come out of it. Either
and
that
if
or
any,
or someone who looks like Grace Kelly will see how incredibly sexy you are and reach out to you.
Skelly. That always gives me goosebumps in Rear Window and Grace Kelly. Her shadow is coming over James Stewart when he's in the wheelchair, and her face is coming closer and closer, and then that slow motion shot of her kissing him, and I'm like, what a way to wake up. You know? The closest I've got to that is Skittles.
I keep telling you how lucky Skittles is, but you don't believe me.
Skittles is lucky, that dad loved him enough to know that I would take care of him when he had his illness. And yeah, Skittles has been with me for a long time. So he's still active,
Well,
actively
cool.
lazy.
Well, I hope we come up with a good topic that'll have me back on the show soon.
I'll have you back on the show. Absolutely. At some point, we need to talk about Edie Adams. I think you said you had a story there. So.
Oh, I have lots of stories there. Edie was a fascinating woman.
Okay.
Fascinating
You
woman.
know, I always keep these in the back of my mind because you're always well worth having come back, and we've done a lot of these.
Yeah,
So if
I enjoy.
anything, even if a book isn't made, we've got the story. So
Hey, folks, fans and friends watching this, and my Canadian friends, uh, quite frankly, I don't get paid to be here. It isn't. I'm not here because there's a check coming with my name on it. I come on here because I love to be with Greg, and I love to be with you, and it makes me happy. So
and you know
hopefully I've made Greg and all of you guys happy today too.
and you know what? I don't get paid to do this either. I do this because I enjoy it. So yeah, this is awesome. This makes my day.
Yeah, yeah. So on my end of things, God bless and have a happy.
Yes, have a mad, 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 mad day.
One mad too many, but I get the point.
Skittles says go one more.
I've had dates like that too, but I'm only human. Anyway,
God
we will
bless you, Geoffrey. And you tell Harlan I said hello as well.
I will do that. Hey, Canada, I love you. I wish we were like you, believe me.
Well, you know what? I love the United States. I love Canada. I just hate our current government right now. So I won't get into that.
No, let's not talk about governments because either way, we're not going to have a good time. So,
Yep.
but
Yeah, absolutely.
the people, I love you. I love you, my Canadian friends. Seriously.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And if I ever do make it to California, we'll get in touch. But
Oh,
I don't know when that'll be. I've had a few people that want me to come out there, and I'm like, I just made it to New Jersey last year. So
okay.
uh,
Baby
small
steps.
steps, but eventually, hopefully. And with that said, Jeffrey, I bid you a wonderful day.
Live long and prosper.
Absolutely. Absolutely.